This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. I don't want to admit that what my guest today says is true. It's an attention-starved audience out there. The population, all of us, our attention is like less than a goldfish. We sit around on these damn phones and act like lunatics, zombies. If it's not said in the first second, we seemingly tune out, don't understand, can't pay attention. My guest today has some knowledge of how these pitches, and that can be any kind of pitch, how a pitch works, how to capture attention and get people to your side right now. I don't care whether you're a hedge fund manager, starting a business, writing a book, I don't care what your deal is, entrepreneur. You have to be able to talk to people. You have to be able to sway them to your point of view, or you can't get a damn thing done. So it is, for all of us, how do you deliver a great pitch for any idea, any situation, so your audience not only remembers your message, but can pass it on to other people? Now, I'm sure to some degree I have figured this out a little bit. Writing a book that perhaps goes viral, like my Turtle Trader book, says that maybe I understood part of this process. But I can safely say, going through my guest work today, I was somewhat just going on instinct and intuition, not the rigid formula that if you're going to capture attention, this is the way you're going to go. And my guest says, look, it's 3 minutes, the 3-minute rule. Say less to get more. That's what it comes down to. And that's hard for all of us because we all want to be wordy. Hell, right now I'm probably being too wordy just to make this introduction. Without further delay, let's jump right into my guest today, Brant Pinvidic, and let him teach us a little about a pitch, the understanding of the pitch, how to deliver the pitch, and why it's so damn important in this age of attention goldfish that we've all become. Once again, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Brant Pinvidic. Let me take it back to a start, because you were not always the guy that was writing this very concise guidebook that really walks somebody through how to capture the attention and get their message across and close it all in under a couple minutes. Take me back to the start of the process. When was the first moment, and you can give some backfill in on your background too, but when was the first moment when you realized, wow, I'm really not pitching people the right way. I'm doing something wrong. What am I doing wrong? How do I figure this out?
I remember the day like it was yesterday. The head of CBS, sort of a famous development executive named Gen Maynard, was very tough in a room. Like, he gave you no expression and he was really hard on people. I came in with a big pitch and it was a gambling thing in Vegas and I had cards. I was going to do a demonstration and I just wasn't quite prepared enough. I kind of stumbled and it was to this day still the worst pitch of my life. It went so poorly and I never got the message across. He didn't understand the show. It just didn't work. I remember being so deflated, and it was early in my career in Hollywood. It wasn't like I could afford to blow a pitch with a major network. So it was really painful. I remember saying, like, that's it. I am never doing that again. I'm going to be prepped and ready as anybody could possibly be. And it was always thinking about Gen Maynard and his style. Like, if you didn't get that information in, you weren't getting a second chance. You weren't getting questions from him. Like, he would literally just say, okay, got it, thanks. And the meeting would be over, just like that. So I started developing a system preparing for that moment where I only had one chance to go through this conversation with him. And at the end of it, he could just simply say, okay, got it, bye. As I developed that more and more, I found that I was actually getting better reactions and things were starting to work. And as my reputation grew and I began to be more successful, it started to work a lot better. And I started to hone those skills.
Let's keep it at Ken for a moment. You've got very little feedback at this moment in time. You're in this room. He's a big exec. It's kind of make or break. I mean, if he likes you, you're off to the races. If he doesn't like you, you're back to the drawing board. You're not getting much feedback. It doesn't look like you're getting much feedback. How do you take away from that? Is it just this internal kind of self-reflection at that moment in time? What could you take away from him at all?
Well, nothing. But listen, there's 4 other major networks. So you're playing those skills against different networks and you start to realize that it's not so much the network executive, it's the pitch itself. And sometimes I would be able to bungle through and have a conversation and be long-winded effectively and not direct and have a nice conversation with an executive that was a little bit more personable. But I started to realize that when I was at my best and when things were working is when I was delivering the information clean and clear. And you had to, like, I'd been in the room where Mark Burnett is sitting right beside me going into a meeting right after me. It's like, you don't have time in those meetings to waste and to act in any sort of salesy way. Like, you got to get the information in clean and crisp and clear. And then hopefully they'll be interested in engaging. And it started to be my only goal in those rooms was to get some form of engagement. I wasn't trying to sell the show. I was trying to get them to ask some questions. Like, they'd be interested in the concept, get through that first hurdle. And then what I realized is that first hurdle is kind of the only hurdle. That is the hurdle. It's the Great Wall. It's everything. That started to really help once I dialed that in.
What did you say, if you can recall? What did you say to Ken that you now know was just the wrong thing to say? Or was it the amount of time you used to talk? I'm just trying to really go back and understand, after you self-reflected, what was it that you did wrong exactly?
I didn't get the concept of the show to him. By the time I got through what I was trying to pitch initially, the concept wasn't clear. I didn't explain what the show was.
And you knew it too. And you knew you were not clear at that moment.
Oh, instantly. And it was so painful. And I felt so bad because you don't get a second chance. You don't get to come in to CBS again the next day and say, hey, I thought about the show. I want to try to explain it to you again. It's dead. And it's like you spend a lot of money on these shows, developing them. There's only a few networks to pitch them. You need to nail those pitches because that's the core of what the business is. I had just thrown away that meeting and thrown away CBS, check mark off the list. And he didn't even get to hear the show. It wasn't even right. And all the things that I fell in love with about the show and the reason why I spent $20,000 developing the material and working for weeks is because I saw the show perfectly and I knew it could work. And the inability to convey that to someone else was heartbreaking. And I see that every day now. If I'm consulting or I'm working with a client, I can see that same pain. They know their company. They know the value. They believe in it. That's why they're sitting in that chair. If they could just make other people understand it, everything would be better. And that's been such a hard skill for people to master. And so it's taken me a while to figure out how to lay it out in a way that people can follow along and improve that. But it's been really exciting and rewarding now that I've kind of got it cracked.
Let me tell you a secret as we kind of a side tangent really quick. A secret, huh? As the audience is listening. I am currently in process. I've been working on a project for over a year, and I've been living outside of the States for a long period of time. It's a script project about an Asian country experience. As I'm asking questions today, a lot of this is so personal. It's like I'm literally preparing to go down a path that you've explored. So I get to kind of just pick your mind and kind of dig through there and listen to all the mistakes and all the things you did wrong and then find out what you did right. And if you hear any of the passion in me today, it's because I'm so damn curious about it. Let's talk about attention span for a second, because I think there's some real science. There's some math behind attention span. And I don't think our phones have exactly helped us these days. So what are we looking at when it comes to the math of attention span right now?
Well, it's a crazy thing, and I speak a lot about that, is that once I started to develop the idea, I really wanted to get the science of how come what I was using to pitch television shows could help plumbing contractors or PTA presidents. It was like there had to be a science to the way people made decisions and understood stuff. One of the big issues is that attention span cracking and what's happening in our society. And Microsoft did a study a little while ago that says the human attention span is down to 8.2 seconds, and a goldfish is at 9 seconds. We have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. So the general understanding and sort of the knowledge we pass around is that, like you said, phones and video games and the internet is wiping out our attention span. And we're almost like these mindless zombies wandering around that can't focus on anything. Ironically, the exact opposite is true. Nowadays, people focus more intently and more efficiently. and more intensely as well. Intent, intense, and efficient. If you can't capture their attention and hold it, they will tune you out in like an 8.2-second instance, as I say. What happens is as soon as we're involved with somebody and they're trying to convey information, we're going to make our initial decision almost instantly. The idea is you want to hold off them making an initial decision, that instant yes or no, as long as you can, so you can get enough valuable information in. Really, what 3-minute rule does is it shows you not only how to condense your stuff to 3 minutes, of course, but how to maintain an attention span of someone where they're interested long enough that you can get the valuable information before they start to make a decision. Because as your audience knows, as soon as someone pitches you anything, you're already saying yes or no within a minute, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, depending on how good and how interested you are.
It's not that we don't want to pay attention when we're interested in something. It's that the pitch needs to be tight. If we like the pitch, for example, we like the trailer to an Avengers film, then we go to the Avengers film or we watch it, and then they have our attention for over 2 hours. It's really that kind of opening salvo. How do you get that person? And obviously Hollywood is great at this. What's the point of a trailer? The point of the trailer is that 2 to 3 minutes to grab your damn attention and make you go do something else.
And that's exactly what it is. And what you find is that we have so much things we can focus on that if I'm going to give you my attention and focus away from everything else, it better be good. It better be worth it. And the second I get sort of tired of what it is or I don't understand it or whatever, I'm kind of out. And that's the way people are. And it's interesting, there's a big study by the Journal of Human Emotion and Personality that talks about how approach motivation works. And approach motivation is literally what it sounds like. What motivates you to approach or engage? They've always thought of the idea that what you focus on, you will desire. So if I could get you to focus, you'll end up wanting it. And that's been a big twist. Hollywood, like you said, has been doing that for years. Like storytelling is kind of the key. In my keynote, I'll show a picture of the Titanic and I'll ask the audience, anybody know what happens to this boat? Everybody knows it sinks. Yet James Cameron can get you to watch a 3-hour movie without your phone in a dark theater by yourself, and the boat sinks. And that's what storytelling effectively does. Is it can lead you down the road and keep your interest and attention for as long as they need to get to the end. If you use some of these Hollywood storytelling techniques, you can learn how to grab that attention from the audience, lead them through what you need them to hear from you, the most valuable pieces, so that when they make their decision, they're finally making it on the best information.
I can think of Hollywood trailers in typically under 2 minutes. It seems like they've gotten a little bit longer in the last couple of years. So I want you to talk about your number. You've got 3 minutes. This is in your title. Obviously, you believe in this quite a bit. And I don't know how much wiggle room there is there. You say 3 minutes. Could it be 2 minutes? Could it be 4 minutes? Why don't you speak to the minute count? And we're talking about when you walk into the room and you want to work someone over with your idea and bring them over to what you see about it. You think you've got 3 minutes. I'm not going to disagree with that because, if you look at trailers, obviously there's a little gauge right there to tell you about the efficiency of time. But why 3 minutes?
There's actually some scientific evidence about the way people make decisions, because when you make a decision, you got to conceptualize what it is. Your brain is to conceptualize it. Then it's got to contextualize it as in, how's it going to work for me and what's important to me? And then you actualize, how can I make it work? And so there is a process that you can use. Really, I've sold, 200 or 300 TV projects in my career, and I never pitched a show with a sizzle tape or a trailer that was longer than 3 minutes, ever. Everything was between 2 and 3 minutes. And sometimes people ask me about the elevator pitch and that one line and getting your log line and that kind of stuff. And that's sort of a different mentality. Yeah, that's important to gather some excitement. But really, if you have genuine information to convey to somebody, you actually have meaningful business or a decision you really need, the elevator pitch just doesn't work anymore. And you need time to explain things, to build value, to give them context. And you got to do it so cleanly and so succinctly that the magic number is somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes. And if you can get to 3 minutes, you've really won, because by that time you'll have all your most valuable information pieces and they'll start to make that decision at that point and they'll have all the value. That's kind of where the magic happens once you've been able to succeed at keeping people's interest for the story long enough.
One of the phrases that you use that I stole from your work, which is just great: separate everything you want to say from what you need to say. Man, if someone could just tell me that when I'm 16 or 18 or something, We all want to say something. We all want to say something, but do we need to say everything?
It's so hard. I had trouble with it in my own book. That's the hardest thing to learn, is the difference between what needs to be said and what you want to say. The idea when you write a book is you write the whole book and then you go back and write the intro, and the intro is supposed to tell everybody what's going to come and get you excited and all that stuff. And I was like, great, that's a 3-minute pitch. No problem. The intro of the book sort of says like, hey, the average business book is about 14 pages long in the intro, but the average reader decides if they're going to read a book in the first 4 pages, which coincidentally takes about 3 minutes to read. I've got 4 pages to get you interested to read further. Basically, that's the idea for the intro. My first pass at the intro was 9 pages long because I had just written the book. And so I had 13 chapters of golden wisdom that I was so passionate about, that I was in love with, that I just couldn't get rid of it. And so I tried to cut it down. I got it to 8 pages. At about 6.5 pages, I was like, okay, I can't cut this down anymore. It's too important. It's so important. I must keep it all in. And it just doesn't apply to me in this particular situation because this information is so good. I had to take a big step back. I had to go literally back to my Post-it note drawing boards. And there's actually a picture of it in the book with me doing the Post-it note starts for a pitch with my own book. And I finally got it down. Here's the most ironic part, is by getting it down, I actually pushed some information to the first 2 pages of the beginning of the chapter 1 because I was in love with that information. I was in love with it. I thought it was so clever. And it was literally 3 weeks ago as we're about to finalize print. And I'm reading it one more time, and I'm reading the first 2 pages of my book, the first chapter, and it's absolute garbage. It made no sense. It didn't need to be there. It was completely extraneous information that I had kept because I just felt so good about it. And I literally cut 2 of the first pages 3 weeks ago, 2 days before we went to publication. That's how hard it is. I have to follow my own advice sometimes.
You can only, as someone who writes a good bit, you can only find objectivity over time. So when you walk away from it, then you come back and look at it, and you're like, how was I such a fool to write that? Why did I write that? What, am I, an idiot? I can't even write. Did I write? And you just cut it so quickly. It's amazing how fast when the light bulb goes off, you're just like, how did I write that? That's complete garbage. Gone immediately. Not needed.
Yeah. And that's sort of what the book has been a big help for people, and sort of my style is like, if you don't have the luxury of time of coming back to trying to be objective, if you follow the steps and the WAC method that I've laid out, you can actually find those pieces through a system to say, like, where's the valuable information? What is informing my audience and what is engaging with my audience? Where to stack them? What comes first? What comes second? What doesn't need to be said in this first version? I kind of take people through the entire process. And in the book, you can actually build any pitch from scratch right from day one with the first Post-it note that helps you build it. That's been the big exercise, is trying to get people to figure out what information, because you know all the information. The reason why you think everything is so valuable is because you know it all. And until your audience knows it like you do, they can't put context to those pieces. And how many times have you pitched something where someone's like, I don't get it. And you're like, what do you mean you don't get it? It was so clear. And it's like, yeah, it's so clear to you. You spent months and weeks, days, hours thinking about it, building it, understanding it. And it takes your audience just a little bit, and you got to guide them through it step by step so they understand it like you do.
Not only do they not get it, but sometimes a little bit of ego, they tell you that they've got it, and what they describe back to you is not even what you created.
Oh my God. We have an exercise, basically it's a telephone game, and I have clients that'll call random people in their lives, and they pitch their 3 minutes or what they think is their pitch. I have them call 2 people, and by the time it gets 4 people back to you, they call on the speakerphone and put it on the speakerphone, and the person, you don't even know who it is. They're like, yeah, I was told to call this number and relay this information back. And it's always so crazy and so different. And that's a little bit of what we're all facing in the world, is something called decision by committee. No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, everybody's been feeling this, where decision makers don't really exist on their own. They need a group. Every major company, every major network, everybody I've been working with has been suffering through this evolution to decision by committee. And what you find is it may not even be who you pitch to. It's probably who they pitch to, or pitch 2-3 levels above you. If you don't have something clean and clear and concise that they can relay, that they can build, then it's going to get lost. So I talk a lot about what's called the rationalization story, which is how human beings make any decision is we rationalize it to ourselves. Doesn't matter if it's the car you drive, or where you're going to live, or if we're going to go to war, or if you're going to cheat on your wife. It's all rationalized. You can build a pitch to mimic how that rationalization story sounds in your head. And that seems to help a lot for that decision by committee and somebody else pitching your idea.
But before you even get to decision by committee, it can literally just be the one person you're communicating with could hear your pitch or read your writing and come back to you and give you feedback. And they're like describing an entirely different show.
Oh, yeah. I've had that multiple times.
But that's on us, though. That's on us because that tells us we didn't do it right, correct?
99.9% of the time, it's on you for sure. Now, a lot of people don't want to hear that. They want to hear that that person just didn't get it. They're not smart enough. They don't know what they're talking about. They've never been there. They don't understand this. They shouldn't have their job. I mean, I'll hear a million excuses from that. But the truth is like, it just means you didn't lay it out in a way that they could follow along to get all the context. That's really what it is. If they can't conceptualize it, they can't contextualize it. If they're not going to conceptualize or contextualize, they're not actualizing. They're not going to be engaged and they're not going to be involved. You've got to get through the concept first.
Here's something that I would like you to speak to because I think this confuses people. We might see a Jim Cameron, we might see a Quentin Tarantino, and we think, maybe we'll look at their script online or something like that. And we think, well, it doesn't look that special. But one of the things that's special about these guys is they've developed across their career some freedom. Coen brothers, Paul Anderson. I mean, these guys have made things and then they've got a group of people that trust them. So they've got this immense amount of freedom to do what they want. And they don't have as many gatekeepers to jump through, as many people to pitch on. And then we all, as the outsiders, we look up to them and say, well, this is how they did it. But that's not really a great way. I think what you're pointing out is for the rest of us, for the 99%, we got a lot of gatekeepers we got to jump through.
Yeah. And I just wrote an article, Forbes, about this, about the idea that creative freedom is not always a bonus. Sometimes it's more of a convenience than it is an add-on to what you want in life. Because if you're James Cameron or you're any of these guys, if you can't get the people around you to buy into your script, how are you going to get millions of people to do the same? And that's what I used to always say when I was negotiating contracts in my TV world. They'd put on this thing about my sort of a creative autonomy. And it was like, I don't need creative autonomy. If I can't pitch the people in my own company on this idea, like what chance do I have on it succeeding everywhere else? I was never concerned with that. And I think that that's a good example where it's like, if you're going to be gatekeepers everywhere, that's okay because you're going to have to get over those gates no matter what.
They're the audience.
It's going to be like that. And if you hone those skills a little bit better to take on anybody in your way, when the important people get in your way, you'll have a better chance of getting over them.
So you mentioned it earlier. Let's go through an example. Start to think about it. As I read 4 quick questions to you, you mentioned what this method is described. Let me read the questions first, then we can put the acronym to it. What is it? How does it work? Are you sure? Can you do it? And that's what you describe as the WHACK method. 4 very simple questions. What is it? How does it work? Are you sure? Can you do it? And it's like, man, if I just, again, back to being 16-year-old Mike, if I just had those 4 questions and I wasn't listening to all the other bullshit that I was being told in every other college class I was in or high school class, and I just had 4 simple questions to learn how to navigate life and bring people over to my side, well, it kind of starts there.
Yeah. And I show you that those questions are in order and they're in order of importance. What is it is the most important thing. That's where you describe literally what it is in the cleanest, simplest sense. And then
stop for a sec. Give an example of something in your career, some show you pitched, something that you sold. What is it? You've got a great one, a weight loss show, an extreme makeover weight loss show. Run through that as an example for people.
Biggest Loser, probably the biggest show that I was ever connected to. And it was like, it's a weight loss show where overweight contestants compete to lose weight. That's what it is. If you can understand the basic piece of that is sort of that log line of what it is, then I can start talking about how it works. There's 16 contestants. They're all overweight. We're going to split them into 2 teams. That becomes the functionality of the idea.
You're like 30 seconds in and you've already answered the first 2 questions.
That's right. And then if you understand that, if you understand that it's a weight loss show where they're going to be competing to lose weight, if you understand that there's 16 contestants, 2 trainers, we're going to split them into 2 teams. Each week we're going to have a weigh off, and the one who loses the most weight is going to lose. In the end, the person who loses the most weight is going to be the biggest loser and the biggest winner. If you understand those 2 things, that's 80% of the buy-in right there. Think about this. If you're a television network buyer, that's really what you want to hear, and you want to hear it like as soon as possible. What is it? Got it. How does it work? Once we got that, then you go into what I would call the engagement phase, or the facts and figures and logic and reason. And that's the are you sure, which means, are you sure this worked? What if people in America weren't overweight? this wouldn't be a good idea then. So that's where I talk about weight loss in America is a multi-billion-dollar industry. People are going to relate. Like, I talk about the facts and the figures.
So that's where you insert the data. That's the data overload. If the spreadsheet guys in Hollywood need the data overload, this is where you're presenting it.
Yeah, why is this a good idea? Are you sure about this? Are you sure this is going to work? And that's where you'd bring those facts and figures. And the number one mistake I see by far across all the clients I work with, about anybody I consult with, is they always have these facts and figures too early in the presentation. Because until you understand what it is and how it works, the details about weight loss and how big it is and how it's going to do all that stuff isn't as relevant. It doesn't have the same impact. And what I want you to do is I want you to hear it and understand what the show is, visualize it, picture it. And now I bring in the facts and the figures and the logic and the reason and how it's working, how we're going to build businesses out of it, how the sponsorship stuff works, all of those things that make real sense now that you know what the show is. That happens. Once I get that, then I can speak about how to make it real, which is, can you do it? Now, that's like, hey, we've produced shows before, we're a big production company, or we don't know how to produce a television show, but we can find somebody that does. That last piece of it is really about 5% of your pitch. Because if somebody wants it, they understand it, they conceptualize it, they contextualize it, they're going to want it and they're going to find a way. And that's actually what happened with The Biggest Loser, is that the guy who originally had pitched it wasn't a large enough production company to pull that size of a show off. And he called my company. And so it wasn't like, oh, you can't produce a show. Sorry, the whole thing's gone. It was already bought in by the time they got there. When you structure it cleanly like that, you can lead people through all the most important information. And it's great because you can filter out all the things that you need to say, not just what you want to say, just those 4 questions.
People panic when they start to think about, can you do it? They don't understand that regardless of what one is doing in life, there is a network of people out there that are willing to collaborate with you, that are willing to go there with you, that can help you. But that number 4 question, can you do it, is such a confidence question. And it can all fall apart there, because if the individual has got the first 3 things figured out, but there's no confidence, guess what? Even though it's only 5%, everybody in that room that you're pitching to, they can see your lack of confidence. You could be the guy. I mean, look, Steve Jobs did not code. He did not make chips, but he had extreme confidence and he knew how to fill in all the other blanks.
Yeah. I don't know why. Like, I spend a lot of time in the small cap public company sector because a lot of trouble in that sort of scientific world and in getting their pitches straight. And a lot of the guys, particularly oil and gas, I don't know why they're so bad. They will literally start their presentation with 3, 5, 7 minutes of, I'm Bob. I used to work at Chevron. I've done this. I've been on the board of this. I studied here. Like, they will spend so much time about who they are and why they're the right person for this job before you even know what it is about their company that's interesting, because they get in their mind that that's the only piece of credibility that matters. And in today's world, access to information and the way the short attention span is, people will figure all that stuff out. The credibility from that side is not nearly as important. It really is, what is it? How does it work? That's the first thing people want to know, is what does my company do and how do we do it? Then it's like, how have we done so far? What's our historical background? How are we going to do it next? And it's like, okay, I get it. Oh, and by the way, you used to run Chevron. Great. That's really how the audience is going to process the information. And you can talk for an hour and they're going to retain about 3 minutes. If I asked you to tell me about your favorite movie, the movie you've seen 150 times, and you told me every single thing about it, every detail, why you like it, what makes it great, you'd be done in about 3 minutes, because that's really all it takes.
Are you extroverted or introverted?
I'm pretty extroverted, yeah. I've developed into that after a while.
The reason I ask is I can be very extroverted. I have to on a show like this. When I'm done, though, I'm a pretty introverted guy. I'm not passionate 100% all the time. That's not what I do. But we are, both of us right now, engaging. The audience has to listen. Well, there's 2 guys. They've got a certain feeling. They want to have a give and take. They want to get to a certain place. If someone walks in your experience, if someone walks into whatever pitch it is, if they are carrying that, I'm Bob, I worked at Chevron, I've done oil, here's my resume. I mean, doesn't that just cause the people that are being pitched to just fall asleep? I mean, maybe it works, but it's just a terrible approach. I mean, it's the personal passion, the personal energy is got to play a role here. When you walk into that room in Hollywood and you're pitching somebody, I don't know your size, your height, your whatever, but I don't know if it really matters when you open your mouth. If you give those people in front of you something where they can feel like, you know what, this guy, he's going to take it to the end. People want that.
Yeah. And you know what? That is historically the way sort of sales presentations, convincing others, winning friends, and influencing people has been dominated. But the problem is now is that we are in an information overload and the audience is so skeptical. And I do a lot on my personal coaching stuff. I have to deal with a lot of people on the extroverted side. They're actually harder for me to train than the introverts. Introverts get more out of my teaching than the extroverts do because the introverts don't rely on their personality to win the situation. And I still have problems with that because I sometimes want to just push past information that I'm not really confident about by adding a little flair. What you find is that passion is really powerful, like you said, of course. It's also very dangerous. It's not meant to be a blanket you throw over everything. It's got to be like a wave that comes in when you need it and it recedes and comes back in with some power. And really the most important thing and the hardest thing that I have to train big extroverted personalities is that you need to be passionate about your facts only, not about your opinions. Somebody who's passionate about their opinions loses an audience almost instantly. And everybody in your audience knows that because they can think of somebody who's a salesman right away. You can feel it. You know they're trying to pitch you. You can feel them trying to sell you. And that's because that passion is overrunning their information and it's making it about them. And then the judgment is about them. Now, it's great if you pull it off and you're beautiful looking and you're super charismatic. Great. That worked out for you. But most times people are put off. That's a really important element, is to be very careful about how you use passion because people will judge you depending on how you use it. And that can be really rough.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you hear too much passion, you realize that person that's too passionate is not listening at all.
Yeah, and nobody wants to be sold. Nobody wants to be sold anything. Think about how you watch a YouTube video or an Instagram thing. The second you feel it's a sponsored thing that someone's trying to sell you, you're instantly skeptical and you don't want to tune in. I mean, I talk a lot about it in that elevator pitch where we used to believe that you make a big promise up front and then you show people how they're going to get it. The elevator pitch is to tell you, I've got the greatest new accounting program that's going to save you 20% on your, and it's like the first person, when they hear that, they don't lean in and go, oh, really? Tell me more. That's not what they do anymore. They think to themselves, oh, bullshit, right away. To combat that, you got to be really careful about coming up with big ideas and making big promises and then trying to prove it. State and prove, as they used to call it, is sort of standard of marketing for so long. And it's like state and prove is really tough to get away with now because people are so skeptical.
Let's talk about being different for a second in terms of the content. Now, look, some people are in very old line, mainline businesses, and that's what they do. But, if I walk into a VC pitch on Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, and I say, I've got this idea for selling personal computers. It's kind of like you might want to wake up, Rip Van Winkle. Something's happened in the last 40 years. You kind of missed the boat. Why don't you speak to the idea, though, of when one wants to pitch that, not that you're making something to have a differentiating point just for the sake of it, but in this day and age, people are looking for something different. I mean, especially in your world. Look, when you go to pitch a show, that weight loss show that you described, I mean, that had not been done before. That was one of the reasons that it worked.
Yeah. And it's funny because people do think they have to impress their audience with the unique element that they're bringing. And that's fine. If you have a great idea, you're going to feel that it's unique anyways. But what you got to remember is that you're dealing with a sophisticated audience no matter where you go. And I teach a lot about how knowledge is a very important thing, not about how much you know, but how much your audience knows. Trying to tell your audience things they should already know is a real sign almost of disrespect now in today's world. What you have to understand is that people are going to get it. And you don't need to explain every little detail. And you don't need to passionately explain how this is going to be the next greatest thing or how it's going to revolutionize the industry. Because whoever you're pitching to is going to need to make that determination themselves. And if you lead them with the information, at the end of it, they may be saying, wow, this could revolutionize the industry. It's great when you have those big pieces, but it's more important to layer them in cleanly without a lot of fluff and pomp and circumstances, because your audience will know these things. They already kind of get it. I talk a little bit about that in Hollywood, how a great director and a good director do things differently. They shoot the same scenes, but a good director will show you everything he shot and show you the glass touching the table and they hang up the phone and slamming the phone down. And he gets into his car and turns the car over and drives quickly and bangs angrily on the door. And she opens the door and she's like, oh my God, you're not supposed to be here. Like, he'll show you every one of those scenes. But a great director will show you the phone slamming and then straight to the door opening. He'll know that the audience understands how to get to A to Z without saying every single letter in the alphabet.
That's so damn prescient, so important, so glossed over, and look, I'm not trying to be all that, but I'm just in a point in my life where when I hear that, I'm like, oh, that's one of those things like, okay, I'm gonna go get a tattoo and tattoo that on my hand. So every time I just look at my hand, it says it right back to me. Hey, let's talk about negatives, weaknesses. When any of us are pitching anything, we've kind of hinted at this in this conversation so far at various points in time, but we don't want people to know about our weak points. We don't want people to know about the negatives of our particular project or pitch. But hiding those things is a million times more negative than letting people know that they exist.
100%. And the fact is that they are going to find out without question. And that's one of the first questions I ask is, what do you hope the audience doesn't find out? Because it's going to come out. That's the way we consume information. This generation, this society now is research heavy. It's at your fingertips. And here's the thing. If your negative was that serious, you wouldn't be selling it. You wouldn't be involved. You wouldn't be a supporter of it. The negative is just something to consider. I get it. It's not the way you would like it. It's something you're going to have to overcome. To you, it's not a deal breaker. Why do you think it would be a deal breaker for somebody else? It will be a deal breaker if they find out about it, that you've been subverting it. They'll definitely be a deal breaker. And if they think you're hiding it, they're not going to be too keen on you. They might still listen, but they're going to be skeptical. What I teach a lot in that, if you've got a negative that someone's going to find out, if you bring it up front and center, they will help solve it for you. And it happened with a pitch I did with John Bon Jovi, where literally 2 days before we were supposed to go in the room, he sat me down at breakfast and said, yeah, this show doesn't work. Like, it's just not right. Because it was an idea of like, what would you be doing if you weren't a rock star, John Bon Jovi? And every week we're going to take different rock stars and they're going to go into a life that they might have had they not been in music.
He was only going to be a rock star. He was never going to be anything else.
Yeah. Well, we had built the entire pit about John Bon Jovi being a landscaper because he liked the outdoors and whatever. And that would have been a great episode of TV. And that's why we envisioned it that way. When I pitched it to him, he was kind of like, okay, yeah. And then he just sat with him and he's like, listen, I would never be a landscaper. I don't like working outside. I've never worked a day with my hands I would never have done this. So we can't go in and tell them that I would. No way. He had talked to Lenny Kravitz and Lenny Kravitz is like, I wouldn't have done anything else. And we were going to say, oh, Lenny Kravitz would have joined the military. And like, so I knew I could not get John Bon Jovi to sort of like skirt this issue. Even if he didn't say it out loud, the network's going to be like, yeah, your star didn't seem so eager. So in the meeting with ABC, I literally said at the beginning of things, like, our problem is with the show is casting it is going to be very difficult because a lot of the rock stars at the level that we're looking at have never really considered anything else but music. Telling the audience that this is what they would have done is probably not going to work. The network executive instantly said, yeah, I totally understand that, but there's a ways around that. I mean, what if we just said it was more like a sliding door thing and we'd give them a chance to see what it's like, and you might take something good from somebody else's life because as a rock star, you missed out on some of the simpler things in life that you can't have now. Like, the network started to solve that problem before they started to think about it. And if I would have skipped over it, they might have started thinking about it later or in the room and didn't say anything. And then it would have permeated. And then the network executive is talking to his boss saying, yeah, the problem is I don't think they can get these rock stars to do these things. I started bringing that into every pitch I brought in.
One thing I love about this book, one particular chapter title, I don't know if potentially it's a violation of Me Too, but it is such a great title. Are you putting the red lipstick on? How do you say it? It's so great because, like, I mean, that is just, everyone knows. I mean, look, you could see a beautiful woman. You could see a beautiful woman walking down the street, and then she walks up to you and she's got this natural beauty. She's absolutely gorgeous. And then she's done something with this spray painted red paint on her lips. And she didn't need to do that.
Let me explain how that chapter came to be. It's from my mom, and my mom is a very famous Sweet Adeline's coach. It's a big singing group. Think Pitch Perfect, but for women and tens of thousands of members all around the world. And so what my mom does is teach these courses. These courses can have 150 people in them, and they have this huge Super Bowl competition every year, right? And she's the judge's judge. She sets the tone. And when she coaches, what she finds is like some of the choruses that want to go to the next level, that want to get better, they don't want to hear that they need more resonance from their vocals because that's hard to do. That takes real work. What they want to hear is, oh, let's change our lipstick shade or put on more sequins. That's what they want to do because it's easier and it's a little flashier and it's not getting to the heart of the issue. And my mom used to say that to me all the time when I would talk about what I was building or what I was pitching or the show I was working on. And she would pick up right away that's like, you don't really have an answer for that. You're making stuff up. You're pushing past the real question. You haven't done your research. And she's like, are you putting red lipstick on? Which means, are you trying to take attention away from the real core value of what you have? And what you'll find is if you're building a pitch or presentation and you come up against a wall where you don't know how to say something, it's better to work it through than it is to fluff over it, because that's effectively putting red lipstick on. Trying to add sequence to something is never going to get you to the next level. You got to kind of do the work and you got to get right down to the actual core value of what you offer and dig through it as opposed to fluffing your way through it.
I give you props on the book because I do see a lot of books, a lot of business books. That's not necessarily a fair description, but for lack of a better term, that's what I'll call them. And you really do a great job of introing the material and then forcing people to have to continue on so they understand all and can apply it. Too much writing I see these days is one great idea that you can probably say in under 3 minutes, spread over 300 pages of things that people want to say but don't need to say.
I absolutely understand that. And I mean, with the publisher directly, I was saying, I got to show people how to take a pitch from scratch, from the very first idea right into the room with someone. I'll layer the book with a lot of cool, fun Hollywood stories that are relevant and fit and keep it entertaining. I don't need to explain the idea that you need to be clear and concise and keep your message short and effective. Like, you don't need 250 pages to do that. What you need is to show people like how to take the skills into everyday life. And I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday after I'd been working with some pretty big companies and a local plumbing contractor who was a friend of my wife. And we were on a ski trip and he literally asked me to look at his business. And I was thinking to myself, well, how am I going to help a guy who's a plumbing contractor? I don't know anything about this business, or he's not a fancy CEO that I've been working with lately. I don't know if these techniques are going to work. And it was the same exact process. My wife's friend's a PTA president and I helped her. And at that point I was like, oh my God, I got to figure out how to make this so I can get it with more people, because it has an effect if you walk them through.
Not to go down the path, we're running out of time, but I want to make the point that for myself, there's a section on bullets. And I had not thought about taking my particular content and making it into bullets and putting it on Post-it notes. So right there, it's giving me a process. It's giving me a technique that I can start to take my complex world of what I want to say and then narrow it down to what I need to say. It's a technique-driven approach that you've put forward. It's not just, I've kind of taken you around on an assortment of issues today, but I want people to understand that this is about certain rules to follow, a certain approach. It's not just Brant throwing his opinions out about what he thinks or what he thinks he's seen. You're giving people a guidebook on, as you say, too, from pitch, from ground 0 to 10, like how to do it.
Yeah, and the bullets are really important. In fact, I literally just did this. A big CEO, big company. My very first interaction when I have a new client is I give them a page with 30 bullets on a company and a business they've never heard of. And it's literally 30 bullet points. My first exercise is, tell me about this company, what they do, and why it's valuable. 99 times out of 100, the people get it exactly right. They can pitch back the company perfectly. And then I give them the same thing, 30 bullet points on a TV show that I was pitching. And they're not in television, and they can pitch the TV show back. And it's like, that's how much information can be contained in simple bullet points. You understand it. You can piece things together. And when you start with that skeleton structure, you start to realize that all of those things will come together if you just stick to the system and follow it along. Everything will be laid out there and people will understand it. And it's fascinating to watch people do that. You just put bullet points on a piece of paper and they know exactly what your company does and why it's good.
You know who doesn't get this? And I respect, and I've had some fantastic guests, brilliant minds, but academics, people that have got their PhDs at the highest levels, world-renowned, don't get this. I mean, some do. Some get it instinctively. I mean, you talk about Bob Cialdini. He's obviously very brilliant about the art of persuasion, what we're talking about today. But so many people don't get this. And I think, this is my guess, is that they have this built-in look-down approach. So if they hear a conversation with you and me, and we're talking about these issues, they would just think, oh, no, you could never bring it down to that level. Oh, you can't do that. They're skimming. But the reality is then the academic is sitting there on his lonesome, locked in an ivory tower, and no one's really seeing their work except perhaps the class in front of them. So, I mean, it's like when you've got that great insight, that great thing you want to share, if you're not sharing it, then what the hell is the point?
Yeah. And I think that really comes from, and I suffered for this for years in my early part of my career, is I always wanted to be the smartest person in the room. I wanted to show people I could be the smartest person in the room. In the academic community, that's sort of a thing because they are the smartest person in those rooms. They become addicted to that feeling. It's hard to peel back and be like, you don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You don't need to impress them with how much you know. Let them know it as well. Let them show you how much they know and let them take your idea and make it part of their idea. That's pretty classic persuasion. Like you said, it's definitely hard in academic society because that's not really the way they do things. They are meant to be the professor. They're meant to be the guide. And it's hard to dial that, for lack of a better word, ego back a bit to just be like, I just need to get the information to you. I need you to understand this course proficient. By the end of this, you need total proficiency. Let me just get you the information as quickly and cleanly and effectively as possible. That's not really the way they do things.
What would have been funny for this particular podcast episode, we do it in less than 3 minutes.
When I do a keynote, I get that heckle every single time. Like, honestly, that's the same joke. I get this, oh, I really liked it. I thought you were great, but it's longer than 3 minutes. And I was like, okay, you got me there.
The book, The 3-Minute Rule, Say Less to Get More from Any Pitch or Presentation. Brant, thank you for your time today. Hopefully we can chat again when you dig in and probably do book number 2. I always tell authors, they always end up doing book number 2. It really is very difficult to steer clear of that addiction once you're in the middle of it.
Oh, I could see that.
I wish you best of luck with the book. Is there a place we can send people? Where would you like to direct everyone?
You can go to the3minuterule.com. Check out everything there. You can go to my website, brantpinvidic.com. I'm across all those socials at Brant Pinvidic, so I'm easy to find.
Brant, thank you for your time today. Enjoy LA.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.